Greetings and welcome to EveryLibrary's 2025 Summer Reads. My name is Andrew Albanese, and I am a book industry reporter and the editor of the brand new newsletter and website Words and Money, which is dedicated to covering the reading and writing enterprise in the 21st century, centering libraries in that enterprise. You can check out our beta site and sign up for our newsletter at wordsandmoney.com. Coming soon, we'll also be hosting a podcast that will feature news and analysis from around the publishing world, including author and newsmaker interviews. Before we get started with today's event, I'd like to say a quick note of thanks to EveryLibrary for inviting me to host this discussion tonight. As some of you may know, it's been a bit of a fraught time for libraries lately, from helping to fight book bans to funding challenges, and now the proposed elimination of the only federal agency that distributes, one of the few federal agencies, I should say, that distributes federal funding for libraries. So tonight is a welcome opportunity for me to take a break from reporting a lot of really challenging news and do something I always love, which is talk with some really very talented authors. But before we begin, please do check out the EveryLibrary website and support them if you can. They are doing yeoman's work in supporting libraries and authors in this very challenging time. Our public library system in America is the envy of the world and a hallmark of our democracy, and it needs your support now more than ever. So if you haven't already done it, please do check out everylibrary.org. And with that, I will introduce our guests this evening, three authors who brilliantly represent and celebrate the American West, and who all work with the great people at Spiegel and Grau Publishers here in New York City. Shelley Read is a writing teacher and the author of the international best-selling debut novel, Go as a River, which won the High Plains International Book Award for Fiction and the Reading the West Book Award for Best Debut, among its many accolades. Shelley is also a fifth-generation Coloradan who lives with her family in the Elk Mountains of Colorado's Western Slope. Shelley, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Thanks so much for having us.
Callan Wink is the author of the novel Beartooth. He's also the author of another novel called August and a collection of short stories called Dog Run Moon. Callan's been awarded fellowships by the National Endowment for the Arts and Stanford University, where he was a prestigious Wallace Stegner Fellow. I must say, Callan, your bio suggests to me a life that I am most jealous of. He lives in Livingston, Montana, where when he's not writing, he's a fly fishing guide. That's what, the Yellowstone River, is that right, Callan?
Yeah, great to be here. Yes, it is. I live right near the Yellowstone River.
Fantastic. Also with us is Bridget Crocker, who is a whitewater explorer and river guide, and whose writing takes readers to far-flung locations. Her new memoir, which is getting fantastic reviews and is out June 3rd, is The River's Daughter, which was billed by Publishers Weekly as a triumphant roadmap for following one's passion. So please welcome Bridget Crocker. Hey, Bridget.
Thank you, Andrew. Super happy to be here, and welcome to everybody.
So I guess I'll start with you, Bridget, since, my last introduction, my first question. I wanted to ask you about your writing, because, the solitude of writing seems like quite the bookend to a life that also features the adventure of whitewater rafting. What started you off as a writer? Can you talk a little bit about your process, where you write, how you write, what you like to write?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I started writing really young, and I was, a very serious journalist, writing in my journal, my diary. When I was a kid, I have all my diaries back to fifth grade. And it was a way for me to keep track of myself. I grew up in a family where there was a lot of gaslighting and things being said, that didn't jive with my point of view. There were a lot of realities, shifting realities. And so writing for me was a way to keep track of my thoughts and my feelings and my reality. And I liked to do that by the river. I grew up next to the Snake River, and I would sort of just disappear into this riverbank with my journal. So that's how writing began for me. And whenever I get away from journaling, I feel like I'm scattered. And that's like the immediate way that I can bring myself back to center is to sit with the journal in nature and collect myself.
I will start also by noting that all of the books tonight really sort of celebrate the rugged beauty of the West, and rivers play a key part in all of them. So I also should ask you in a little bit about your life, and in this memoir, the river really plays a very important role. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship with the river?
Yeah,
River?
thanks. It started, my relationship with rivers started where I grew up in Jackson Hole on the Snake River. And that's where I would go to get nurtured, and to be comforted and to kind of get a sense of who I was. Who I was with the river was somebody that I felt cared for by the river. And so it was a place where I could go and just feel comfortable, in a really turbulent childhood. And that relationship grew into becoming a river guide on the Snake, and then later in other places, including Zambia, which I detail in the book. But, for me, like, my relationship with rivers is probably one of the most important in my life, because it's where I get a sense of who I am, and I'm reminded of who I am. And, and there's a possibility with that, because I know I'm not trapped in these multi-generational cycles. I can have the freedom to change and grow into something different.
Yeah. Callan, Beartooth features two brothers who sort of live off the grid, maybe outside the law a little bit. And I don't want to spoil the story for our readers here who are surely going to pick this up for their summer read, but tell us a little bit about the book and how the idea of it came to you.
Sure. So the book kind of centers around two brothers living in Montana, near the Yellowstone River, a location pretty similar to where I actually live. But they've recently experienced the death of their father. They're facing some pretty severe financial difficulties, and one brother, a little older than the other, is kind of cast into this role of trying to figure out how to sort of dig themselves out of this hole their father's death has left them in, and their looming financial problems sort of lead them to undertaking this dangerous, very illegal sort of heist in Yellowstone National Park. So disaster ensues, that sort of thing. Yeah.
The reception for the book has been terrific. It's gotten great reviews as well. I saw that you were called a new voice of the American West in one review. Another outlet called you the Bard of Yellowstone Country. I wonder if you could talk about what that means to you. Aside from what the critics say and what the reviews are, how would you describe your voice, and how maybe has the West shaped it?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I was born in a very small town in Michigan. I left there as soon as I could, basically, and moved to Montana. I got a job on a dude ranch when I was 19 years old. And have kind of been there ever since, in the summers at least. Fishing guiding is my kind of main source of income. And one thing I realized pretty quickly getting out of the Midwest especially is that it just seemed like everywhere I went in Montana, I'd run into these people that just kind of had this sort of like outsized personality. I always kind of make the claim that it's like, fish in a fish tank. The larger the tank, the bigger the fish gets. And it's sort of similar to personality. I feel like people in Montana, there's a lot of wide open space and freedom to be as weird as you want to be. A lot of great stories to be had, I feel like. And so every time I'm out somewhere at the bar, actually, I forgot to answer half of your question, your first question. The sort of the genesis of the story, it's something I heard in a bar one time. Not to give too much away, but I don't know if it's true or not, but basically these guys went into Yellowstone Park and did sort of this illegal act, this heist that's in the book. And I always thought it was a great premise for a novel. I have no idea if it's ever actually happened, but I like the idea of it. So yeah, in general, the West, there's been so many great writers that I feel like there's a great tradition, and if I'm some small footnote in that list of great Western writers, I'd be pretty happy.
Well, I want to return to that point for all of you and have you talk about the great tradition of Western writers in America. But another question for you, Callan, which actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to switch over to Shelley now. Hi, Shelley.
Hi.
The paperback of your book, which I have right here, Goes the River, is out June 3rd, correct?
Well, it's the paperback release for the
right.
novel is out June 3rd. Yeah, the hardback has actually been out for slightly over 2 years.
To
Yeah.
great reviews, I would add, and a lot of international interest. What a debut. Absolutely fantastic. The book has won readers in something like 34 territories, right? It's, again, the reviews have been excellent. Again, tell us a little bit about the process of writing this debut for you. Debut novels are not always easy. And I'm going to guess that being a proud fifth generation Coloradan played a major role in crafting this book, but was this like a lifelong labor of love for you? Did lightning strike? How did this debut come about?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. I guess a little bit of both, but I, like Bridget, I've been drawn to writing my whole life. I've been just sort of as a kid, I thought very narratively, and I was always curious about what's the story there. And I wrote lots of poems and short stories as a kid. And then I went on for both my undergraduate and my graduate degrees, all in writing, because I knew that's what I was going to do with my life. But while I was a graduate student, I was awarded a teaching fellowship, and I ended up falling head over heels in love with teaching. And I ended up being a teacher for almost 30 years. And in that time, I also became a mom and my 2 wonderful kids. And I just found myself writing less and less. So once this character, Victoria Nash, the main character of my novel, started forming in my mind, she is really what turned me back toward my writing life. But I was very busy, had my hands full as a professor at Western Colorado University and raising my kids when this character came along to me. And I really didn't have time to write it, but bless her, she just kept poking at me, telling me I really just needed to tell her story. And I chipped away at it for about 13 years, actually. So putting it out in the world at 57 years old, a couple years ago, was such a dream realized in my life. And then the way that it took off, both here in the US and internationally, was nobody was more flabbergasted and shocked about that than I, but I've been incredibly grateful because, yeah, it really was a labor of love and it really was a lifelong dream.
Well, we are lucky for Victoria Nash's persistence and continuing to thank you. Tell me a little bit about the book's reception. I wonder what you hear from your readers, both in Colorado and in the West, but also that the book has gotten such great international interest and such great reach. Have you heard from people who live outside of the American West or even in Europe about what has drawn them to this book?
Oh, yeah. One of the greatest parts of this journey is it is being translated into 34 languages, and it's sold in 40 something territories. I've been on 3 large European book tours. I think book touring over the past 2 years, I've been to 12 states and 11 countries. And so I've actually had the extraordinary pleasure of meeting face-to-face with writers cross-culturally. And I actually got to ask them that question. So what is it about this novel that just really gets into people's hearts, which is every writer's dream. And I think I find that it's really a story about discovering one's strength and resilience, how we all are much stronger inside than we know we are until we have to bear the seemingly unbearable. I think that's one of the messages of the book. And I think that's really resonating with people. And then back to your point about me being a 5th generation Coloradan, and all 3 of us are so rooted here in the natural world. And we're all we have so much admiration for wild rivers and wild places. And that forms all three of these books that we're talking about today. And I think actually people are really craving that in the world, something that turns them back toward their own relationship with the natural world that maybe has been severed, or they've become alienated from that over time. I think that element of the novel has really resonated around the world. And I'm finding that people really have such an affection for the American West and my narrative that's very rooted in my Colorado landscape in the Gunnison Valley. So I think that is the thing that really has brought so much attention to my novel around the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's always been a hallmark of the Western writers, is like the expanse of the American West. Just as, in fact, that's something that I would love to talk about a little with each of you. And that is, this seems especially true for writers of the American West. Can we talk a little bit about how you approach nature in your writing? Is there any daylight between your ideas and your stories and how you approach the natural world? Because it seems like nature isn't just a setting, it's a character in your works. So are there any writers that are especially influential in this regard? Callan mentioned that earlier. So let's just kick off a discussion about nature and writing and the American West. And Bridget, do you have anything you want to contribute?
Yeah, one of the writers that really influenced how I tell stories is Pico Iyer. And because he has such a grasp on place. And I read Cuba in the Night, which is set in Cuba. And it's, this really like snappy kind of salsa prose. And then I read, the next book was The Lady and the Monk, which is set in Kyoto, Japan. And it's kind of like ethereal and like misty. And with each of those books, I was like, oh, well, this is his voice. This is how he writes, but I started to see as I read more of his books that each of his books, he evokes the voice and the culture and the texture, and it just absolutely envelops you in the place with his language. And it's just completely captivating. And so I really studied that and aspired to do that, to be more of a conduit for the voice of the place to come through and not really put myself and my thoughts and overload it with what I thought of the place, but let it speak for itself.
That's interesting. Callan, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. I think, in terms of influence, there's so many. One that I always come back to, and I reread once a year at least. I've probably read it like 20 times. Is Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. And just, it's Southwest, but his sort of descriptions of the desert are always really impressive to me. And sort of how he's able to create, like you said, the desert as a sort of character, almost sometimes malevolent seeming, but many great writers. But just in terms of writing the nature itself, I think part of it's not even something I really think about too much, because most of my characters that I want to write, it's sort of like that's their reality and their world, probably because my imagination is somewhat limited and I haven't lived in a city for any length of time in my life. So it's kind of like, that's what I know. I would have a really hard time writing a novel set in a place where, for instance, like I didn't know the names of the trees. Even if the trees weren't in there, it would like hang me up somehow, to not be pretty familiar with the landscape.
Shelley.
Well, I think I agree with you, Callan. knowing a landscape deeply and in your soul, you kind of, it's just such a part of you that's where your stories come from, and that's your reference point. For me, I think my answer to your question is sort of twofold. One is I was, as a professor, one of the founders of the interdisciplinary environmental studies program at my university, and I taught all the environmental history, philosophy, and literature. So I have sort of this long academic background in history, in the literature of the American West, and in that literature, I have so many favorites or loves that I can not even begin to list them all. But I would throw out that I absolutely love the quiet, very rooted to the land writing of Terry Tempest Williams, who is a generational woman from Utah in a similar way that I'm a generational woman from Colorado, and her writing has always really resonated with me. But the other influence, I think, for me about writing so deeply about the landscape comes far less from literature and far more from my ancestry and from my ancestors who homesteaded. My great-great-grandparents on all sides homesteaded, 1870s, before Colorado was even a state. And all of them were very, very tied to the land. Ranchers, farmers, homesteaders, a lot of mountain climbers in my family. I am one of them as well. And my grandfather was an incredible storyteller. And I actually knew my great-grandparents well into their 90s. And I just am so grateful for that sense of place that's just kind of deep in my bones. And so my novel, I think, necessarily became about place and displacement and about home and family, all deeply rooted in the landscape, because honestly, it's what means the most to me. And I spend all of my as much time as I possibly can in wild places. And I think that it's very instructive. Wild places are very instructive. They're very humbling. And I tried to kind of pour that all into my novel to kind of inform my main character's journey.
I'm going to guess that's a theme that runs consistently for all of you, which is about spending a lot of time in nature. How do you balance your writing? Bridget, how much time do you spend on the river versus at your desk?
Well, like Shelley, I'm a mom, and I have two teen girls. And so I spend a lot of writing time when they're at school, kind of around their schedules. And we have had the great privilege of living in a state park where my children have grown up. So we're surrounded by nature, and I could go out for an afternoon walk or whatever and take the kids out. And then we'd go on rivers during the school breaks. We do river trips. So I'm kind of, immersed in it, and it's built into my everyday life. It's not something that I necessarily have to plan for. I can just, after this, I'm going to go outside and go for a walk. But yeah, that's one of the things that's really important to me. And the thing that grounds me and helps reset my nervous system is being outside.
Yeah. You spend a lot of time, obviously, on the river. Callan, you're a fly fishing guide. Are you a fly fisherman first and a writer second, or a writer first and a fly fisherman? How does that work for you?
Yeah. The fishing takes up a lot of my time. I don't write much at all in the guide season, which is going to be starting soon. So it's a nice way to split up the year. I write in the off season, and I guide every day in the summer. So usually at the end of my fishing season, I'm very ready to write, and then at the end of my writing season, I'm ready to get back in the boat. I don't necessarily love spending time behind the computer, so it's kind of like something I have to force myself to do.
Yeah. Shelley, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I agree. It's the trickiest thing about the writing life for people who don't appreciate being inside and don't want to sit because I'm always if I could spend all of my time in the wilderness, I would. I live at 9,000 feet elevation high in the Colorado Rockies. I'm completely surrounded by wilderness areas. Summer, winter, you name the season, I'd rather be out there. And I am often with a notebook and a pen, because I don't want to sit at my computer. And historically I was teaching, taking my students out into the wilderness, climbing mountains with them. It's a tricky thing actually to get the words down in a computer when what informs those words and what really generates your kind of stirring your soul enough to want to write is actually out in the wilderness, and you have to kind of sit down in an office with a laptop and write it out. But I think it informs each other, and it's super nice to be on talking with Bridget and Callan, who fully gets that, because I don't know. I think it is a real privilege and a joy of growing up in the American West and being so comfortable in wild landscapes and loving that and letting it source your inspiration. I know that's not true for everyone. So it's always really lovely to meet other authors who get that. And I'm super grateful for that in my life. And I'm really good at clearing space to be out in the wilderness. I'm less good at clearing space to actually sit down and write. So,
well, it is true. That is, after this session, I too will be taking a walk to the river, but it will be the Hudson River, which, while impressive, is not in the same league as some of your rivers out west, shall we say. I wanted to talk with you about the publishing process for each of you too. But I just learned before we got on the air here that you were all together at the publishers at the Winter Institute, which is a great gathering of independent booksellers. It's held in January. And I wonder what that was like for you, getting a chance to, talk with independent booksellers and be with each other, and give me a sense of what that was like for each of you. Bridget, you want to start?
Yeah, well, it was my first time, so I had nothing to compare it to and didn't know what to expect. And I was put immediately at ease when Shelley came, blowing in from, she told me that she woke up at Zion National Park that morning, and it was, we were in, she had been camping, and I was like, okay, these are my people. I can, I can relate. And then meeting all of the booksellers, just an amazingly thoughtful and kind group of people in general. I was so heartened by being around them and, being like a book nerd. And that's another thing of being sort of an outdoors woman. There's not a lot of people who are outdoorsy and book nerds. It's kind of a small Venn diagram. So hanging out with Shelley and Callan at Winter Institute, and then being, around a lot of book people was just thrilling for me.
Yeah. Had you guys met before in any way, or did you know each other or know each other's?
No, we hadn't met before, but I feel like I've known them both for a really long time. And Shelley, had debuted Go as a River 2 years prior. And so she was super helpful, and just, since it was my first rodeo, like, here's how you get on the horse. And just being really the great teacher that she is.
Yeah. Callan, Shelley, you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. To second most of that, I hadn't been to that event before, and in my normal life, I'm not really around. I don't talk about books really at all, or rarely. So it was kind of energizing to be around so many people who were so stoked about books, and it's nice as a writer to know that there are those people out there, because sometimes it feels like you're just sort of toiling away in a vacuum. But to be around all those people who were genuinely excited about books was refreshing for sure. Yeah.
I did my first event ever was the Winter Institute 2 years ago in Seattle.
Oh. So you've been to two then?
Yeah, I had the great honor of being to two, but the first one, I had no idea what I was doing. It was a huge learning curve, starting a whole new career at my age. And I really felt such an enormous difference being able to come to Winter Institute this year after 2 years under my belt of a lot of book touring and kind of figuring out the publishing world. And more than anything, I've had the great pleasure of meeting a lot of those independent booksellers over the last 2 years, because they have given extraordinary support to my book. Bless them. And so I actually got to see a lot of people there, booksellers that I'd already met. So that was incredible. And it was such a joy to meet Bridget and Callan and know that I had kind of been in their shoes, and it's super exciting to be able to cheer them both on. Both of their books are fabulous. And it was just a real joy to just be part of this Spiegel and Grau family. As a publisher, they're very supportive of their authors, and it's growing. It's just growing like crazy. And it's beautiful to get to feel part of this little publishing family, as well as get to connect with all those booksellers. So I was really, really grateful to get to attend that and make, two new friends here. So that's wonderful.
The indie bookseller community is a wonderful community and vital. in American letters. Rivaled, I would say, only by the library community, which, were our sponsors, EveryLibrary tonight. And, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your experiences with libraries over the years. Shelley, do you want to start?
I will enthusiastically, because the libraries also have been incredibly supportive of my book. And I have visited, I don't even know how many, because no matter how busy I am, if I get an invitation from a rural Colorado library, I try at least to always say yes. So I've been in these little pockets, these little towns, libraries all over Colorado, but also, gosh, all over the place, because I love libraries and the vital role that they play in our communities. And as you mentioned, when we opened, they are in need of our support now more than ever. And I've loved hanging out at my local library when I was a kid. And I've just been so honored. I just did a library event on Saturday. They're the kindest, most lovely, wonderful events. And I have been really, really grateful and honored for the support that the libraries have given me. And I just want to give that support right back.
Callan, how about you? Any special connection to libraries in your life?
Yeah, I definitely owe a lot of to library. I was raised in a very, very small town. 300 people maybe, and didn't have a television in my house. And my mother would take me to the tiny little local library once a week, and I would just get a giant stack of kind of paperback Westerns usually, or whatever. Nothing, I wasn't reading the classics or anything, but just reading a lot. And going to the library every week was sort of like, that was a big deal in my childhood. And it's something I'll always remember for sure.
Callan, was there a bookstore nearby, or was the library like the only game in town for you?
Yeah, my town didn't have a bookstore. It had a blinking stoplight and a gas station. That's it, basically.
And a public library, which is awesome.
The library it was down the road a little, yeah, but it was connected to the school, which was the school I went to. It was two of those tiny towns put together. So, yeah.
Bridget, anything library related you want to share with us?
Yeah, I spent an inordinate amount of time in libraries as a kid. I was the kid that would bike to the library and get the book to, I always did the summer reading program. I was obsessed with the summer reading program, and I still am. I get super excited when they put the cards out. My kids think I'm a total dork. I'm like, oh, summer reading program's happening. But yeah, my mom is the world's biggest reader, and I'm not exaggerating. And so we went to the library. That was the main event, was going to the library. And I probably have 4 different library cards in my wallet right now. So huge fan. And I do a lot of work at the library too. Whenever, think I need some quiet or I need an extra workspace, I go to the library.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I do the same thing. I will work in my public library, borrow tons of books. Very important in my kids' lives too, I should say. Very important there. Well, I think we're running up close to out of time. I probably had one more question I would throw at each of you, though I have plenty more that we could be talking about. And I guess it would be what's next for you? Are you book touring? Callan, I gather you're hitting the river again pretty soon. But I don't know if there's a book tour in your future you want to mention. Is there another book that's about to come out? Bridget, what's next on your agenda?
Well, I'm gearing up to go on a pretty extensive book tour. Very excited about that. And I have all the details, and Spiegel and Grau does as well, on Instagram and on my website and their website. So I hope I get to connect with a lot of readers over the summer.
Callan, is it all fly fishing for you now for the next little bit, or?
Yeah, starting in about a week, but I've been in Costa Rica most of the winter and surfing, but writing a lot. So, yep, trying to write another novel, slow going, but that's how it goes. So
that's how it goes. Shelley, is there another character that's been poking you for the last 13 years?
Yeah. I'm really hoping not to take 13 years for this new novel. I am working on a second book. I've been working on it for a couple of years now, and same like Callan, it's slow. It's really hard. I was so deeply immersed in the characters of Go as a River. It's been hard to kind of get to know a new set of characters. It's almost like they felt like strangers at first, but I think I'm well on my way with that novel. It's been a tricky thing to be both out very publicly with Go as a River, with all these different release dates all over the world and a lot of book touring over the past 2 years. So the two hats that an author wears when you're out on stage and book touring, which is so wonderful, and meeting the readers, but then also that very introverted side of you that needs to pull in and to write. So I've been trying to balance it. I'm joyfully headed out on the road for a paperback book tour. That should be announced here in the next couple of days, all of those details. The primary focus is throughout the month of June that Spiegel and Grau is putting together for me. And then I have lots of events throughout the rest of the year. So that'll also be on my Instagram and on my website. Those should be up real soon. And yeah, like I said, one of the greatest joys of this whole journey is meeting the readers. And so I'm really looking forward to getting back on the road another time. This time it's a lot of East Coast and Midwest, some places that I haven't had an opportunity to visit yet. So very excited about it.
Great. Well, I think that is pretty much our time. Shelley Read, Go as a River, paperback, out June 3rd. Go pick it up. Bridget Crocker's River's Daughter, publishing on June 3rd, correct? To some really wonderful reviews. Congratulations to you and Beartooth, Callan Wink. 3 great books for your summer reads from 3 terrific authors. Thank you all for joining the program today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for talking with us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.